For us, take a look through the papers, notably here in France this time with Diptyque Laurent. Diptyque, today, sexual harassment, it's spreading once again. It's taking over the front pages of one newspaper, at least here in France, Libération, saying it's gone into students' unions now, the problem.
That's right, and it's actually a long-standing problem. That's at least what Libération, the left-leaning paper, is alleging in today's edition. They're talking about, quote, testimonies that have rocked l'UNEF, which is France's major student union. 16 women have come forward talking to Libé about how union leaders and people in the senior parts of the union allegedly abused them between 2007 and 2015, practices that were well known within the organization but once again swept under the carpet, something we've seen all too much of lately. One woman interviewed by Libé talks of, for instance, repeatedly harassing behavior allegedly by one member. In fact, that member even followed her home in one instance, according to her testimony. Other militants have condemned a sexist culture, like under notably union president Jean-Baptiste Prévost, who presided over the organization from 2007 to 2011. During his tenure, the union, I quote, became a daily sexual hunting ground. On one hand, he'd be on TV sets defending the student cause. On the other, he'd be nabbing cell phone numbers from the union's inventory to pursue sexual relations.
And indeed, looking here, Libération is giving the first 7 pages of its newspaper to this issue. Some pretty choice words, I imagine, for the...
That's why the editors have very choice words for this scandal. That they actually explain in today's editorial that last year's Harvey Weinstein scandal prompted many of these women to finally speak out about their experiences. Clearly, here Libé's editors say this scandal shows the, quote, culture of the inequality between the sexes, which is, quote, dangerous and unacceptable.
Okay, well, your next story I believe you picked up on is the front page of Le Parisien, which is inheritance, how to avoid a conflict. And this possibly making the papers because of a recent inheritance debate over Johnny Halliday's legacy and his money.
That's right, and his debts, it must be. It probably isn't spoken about as much. But yes, Johnny Hallyday, France's famed rocker who died in December of last year. Well, now his family is being torn apart by an inheritance scandal just a few months later, notably engulfing Johnny Halliday's 2 eldest children, Laura and David, who have essentially been cut out of his will that's worth tens of millions of euros, Eve. Instead, his fortune will go to Halliday's 4th wife, Laetitia, and her 2 young children. Now, this affair has become very public because Halliday's eldest children are now contesting the will, which was drawn up in Los Angeles, and that is actually at the crux of the problem as well. Le Parisien's editors are quite sympathetic with Laura and David today, saying disinheriting someone is, quote, refuting the love that you had for them, even denying their existence.
Of course, that's illegal in France. You can't just cut your children out of your will. Nonetheless, even with a lot smaller fortunes, there can be a lot of conflict.
Well, Le Parisien has actually helpfully put together a guide of how to avoid these family conflicts because, of course, many people are concerned by things like inheritance. Maybe not in the millions, but still everyone is entitled. Many kids, most children, I imagine, would be entitled to inheritance from their parents. Obviously, compounding that is the fact that it comes at a time of incredible grief for a family, right? It's somebody has just died and you have to deal with these money issues. Now, what's interesting, though, is Huffington Post is looking at why the issue of wills can be so troubling for people left out. It's not just about the money. Leaving something to your loved ones is a, quote, sort of last judgment. It's also in many ways seen as an indictment on the love you had for them or a measure of one's love for their children. Interestingly, as you mentioned, French law tried to make wills more equitable, but in the U.S. this is not the case, and this is at the very heart of the Halliday inheritance scandal.
Okay, I have to say it's an interesting one, if somewhat depressing. Well, let's move on and head over to the Winter Olympics. The French paper is picking up on something I had actually spotted at the start of these games, a pretty impressive North Korean cheer squad.
That's right. If you've seen any of the North Korean games, it's hard not to have noticed their incredible cheer squad, who, for Libé at least, should be getting the gold medal in cheering. Who are these mysterious yet omnipresent girls who bop their head in unison, walk in line, and have stolen the thunder from skiers, from ice skaters and bobsledders? Well, Officially, there are about 200 of them, and you can't get anywhere near them without being pushed back by their heavy security. They also always have the most expensive and best seats at North Korean games. How is this possible given how poor North Korea is? Well, it turns out they're paying for none of it. It's like an all expenses paid trip. The IOC has picked up the tab for their trip to South Korea. Whatever the IOC doesn't pay, well, Seoul will pick up the tab. Total cost of almost $2 million.
Okay, a bit of a fascinating one there. Finally, let's come back to France, and a town mystery apparently has finally been solved. Tell us all, Dipti.
Well, for the past 3 weeks in the town of Poligny, it's a small town in eastern France, residents have been waking up to strings of garlands of underwear being strewn all across the streets in the city centre. Very mysterious appearances. It actually made national news and nobody knew who was behind it until this week. It turns out it was a school experiment by a group of middle schoolers. They hung up the underwear in the streets for the very purpose of analysing reactions and analysing the effects of fake news, speculation, and the impact of how the media relays information. Turns out the joke was on us because now they're transforming those reactions into a school play.
Okay, nice one. See, we're being tested all the time. Better stay on our toes. Dipti Laurent there with the French papers. Thanks indeed for that.